These are the men who wielded the most devastating machine gun in military history, and they paid an unthinkable price for that power. This is the story of the 50 caliber gunners who faced horrors that would break most human beings. When General John Pershing demanded a machine gun with at least half-inch caliber rounds in 1918, he couldn't have imagined he was commissioning a weapon that would become synonymous with both incredible firepower and unimaginable suffering. Because John Browning's M2 machine gun, lovingly called Ma Deuce, delivered between 10,000 and 15,000 foot-pounds of force with each round, 5 times more powerful than standard infantry rifles, and at 400 to 550 rounds per minute, it could literally shred buildings, penetrate armor, and tear human beings apart. But the men who operated these weapons paid a price that statistics can barely capture. Let's start with the most claustrophobic nightmare in military aviation, the ball turret gunner, where you were chosen because you were the smallest man on a B-17 crew and got squeezed into a Sperry ball turret just 3.5 feet in diameter, curled into a fetal position with your back and head pressed against the rear wall and your feet in heel rests, completely dependent on hydraulic systems to rotate your glass prison through the sky. And the real horror was that there was no room for a parachute. While every other crew member had their lifeline strapped to their back, yours stayed in the cabin above you. At 28,000 feet over Nazi-occupied Europe, temperatures could drop to 42 degrees below zero, and ball turret gunners experienced this cold more intensely than anyone else on the aircraft. Frostbite wasn't just common, it was expected. And in 1943, gunners in the waist, tail, ball turret, and upper turret sustained 75% of all frostbite injuries in the entire Army Air Forces in Europe. Some men losing fingers and toes, while others watched their saliva freeze before it could leave their mouths. But the cold was only the beginning. The mortality statistics for these crews were staggering. The US 8th Air Force alone suffering more than 26,000 deaths, and bomber crews experiencing casualty rates that could reach 50 to 70%. And one B-17 navigator, who had once been an insurance actuary, calculated the odds and quietly told his pilot that mathematically there was no way they were going to live through it. While ball turret gunners faced mortality rates some sources claim reached 60%, meaning that every mission was a gamble with death. The psychological horror was just as devastating as the physical danger, because these men watched their friends explode in mid-air or spiral down in flames, saw the faces of enemy pilots as they closed in for the kill, and pulled triggers that sent streams of 50 caliber rounds into other human beings, each burst powerful enough to tear a man apart, while they fired hundreds of rounds per minute. The waist gunners had it just as brutal, standing in open positions on the sides of the aircraft, exposed to enemy fire and winds so cold they froze the moisture in their eyes, some resorting to urinating in cans and throwing them overboard, because their relief tubes would freeze solid and block their view. The horror did not end over Europe, because in Vietnam, the 50 caliber returned in helicopter doorways, where gunners sat with their legs hanging over the jungle, completely exposed to ground fire, with no armor and no protection except their own skill and the speed of the aircraft. And although the myth of a 5-minute life expectancy was exaggerated, the reality was still brutal, with thousands of crew chiefs and gunners killed, and every burst of fire delivered at targets close enough to see. Even America's most decorated soldier, Audie Murphy, who earned his Medal of Honor while manning a 50 caliber machine gun on a burning tank destroyer and holding off an entire company of German infantry for over an hour, carried the psychological cost for the rest of his life, sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow and suffering from insomnia, depression, and nightmares. Because when he was asked why he did it, he simply said they were killing his friends. The Germans understood the devastating effectiveness of these weapons and knew that American gunners with them were tipping the balance of air combat. And in Vietnam, the People's Army placed a massive bounty on Marine sniper Carlos Hathcock after he used a scope-mounted M2 to make a record-breaking 2,500-yard kill. Because the .50 caliber did not just kill, it created fear. After more than 90 years in service, the M2 remains the standard heavy machine gun throughout NATO and has been used in every major American conflict from World War II through Afghanistan, and is still seeing action today. Modern upgrades making it more efficient and reducing muzzle flash, but never changing the fundamental reality that someone still has to pull the trigger and watch the devastating effect of those rounds on human targets. A Marine who survived being shot by a .50 caliber round once said that the doctors did not know how to put him back together because they had never seen anyone survive being hit by one, which is the level of destruction these gunners controlled with their hands.
If you want to see more stories like this, tell me in the comments what you think about the .50 caliber and the men who carried it. And subscribe to the channel to help keep these stories alive, so history is never forgotten.